So let's talk about the documentaries. The most recent one is Native Bigfoot, right?
Mhm.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to. Just tell me about that. How did that come about? Um, who's in it? I mean, I'm very excited, especially because of the old legends. What might be inside.
Right. You did get the link that I'd sent you previously so that you
Hmm.
could watch the preview version.
I did. I just haven't
Okay,
haven't
okay.
been able to,
All right.
unfortunately.
I wanted to make sure I hadn't screwed up.
Oh
So,
yes.
all right. Um, so basically, when we did Cultured Bigfoot, the very first one, as we were doing interviews, one of the things that constantly came up, because the first one was about the Bigfoot community, the culture of Bigfoot.
Hmm.
And the one thing that continued coming up as we were listening to everybody was that the natives know the secret. This has been in native legend and lore for a long time. And so there would be, we would talk to somebody and they would say this about Bigfoot, and they would say native First Nations. We talked to another one and they would say this about Bigfoot, and then they would say native and or First Nations. There was always that thumb that overlapped. Every
Hmm.
single person said something about the native side of it. And so when we got our first film out, Cultured Bigfoot, and we were greatly surprised because it's the first time we'd ever done anything like this. We were greatly surprised at the reception that it got. And I mean, Andy, in that first year, I'd have to look back and see, but we did like 15 different events. Some of
Wow.
them, a couple were small, but I mean, literally a couple were small, and the rest of them were conference type things, that you're aware of. Um, and so we started seeing the audience on Amazon. We had put it up on there for rent download, growing, and we were just overwhelmed by it. Well, literally that first day that it was out and we were seeing the numbers coming in, Amy said, "We've got to make 3 films. We've got to make 2 more." And she said one of the things everybody talks about is, as small as the Bigfoot community is, and as weird as it seems to people from the outside, you have the woo crowd within it
Hmm.
that's ostracized within the community. And so she said, we need to address the paranormal aspect and the woo crowd. And she said, we've got to end up with native Bigfoot. And that was by design because we wanted our skill set to have grown to where that our third one, native Bigfoot, we were hoping it to be the best one. And so, anyways, that's what we did. We worked towards, as soon as the first day that was out on Amazon, Cultured Bigfoot, we worked towards the third one. And like Amy sat down and wrote like 5 pages of questions and narration the first day that Cultured Bigfoot was out. And then we just kind of worked through to that. And once we got Paranormal Bigfoot out, the Bigfoot community overwhelmingly said, "You're making a mistake. You're going to the woo crowd. You're going to the paranormal, and it's going to be awful." And you guys are, well, by chance, we did like 9 conferences that next year, and that was by
Hmm.
choice because we were cutting it back some. Um, and it debuted on Amazon and just went crazy. It blew Cultured Bigfoot out of the water.
Hmm.
And the thing is we were finding out that the Bigfoot community is about this big. Everybody else that watches our stuff is like this because the the 2 films that have been up there for 1 and 2 years already now keep getting, even though I put them on Prime at this point, just keep getting hundreds of views a day. And we're in the UK and we're in the US is the only
Hmm.
place we are. And so anyways, when we got down to the native Bigfoot, we were sure that this was going to be our biggest and best one. And me and her, one of the things you'll see about our stuff is we're not flashy. We're documentary. We're dialogue driven, documentary, informational. We hope that our stuff is used as reference material
Hmm.
because we're not the stars of it. We're piecing together the interviews and letting all of these uh, Bigfoot researchers and PhDs, boots on the grounds and stuff. We're letting all of them share their information, so we're learning from it. So when people would ask, "Well, are you a researcher?" We're like, "Well, we love the subject, but we
Mm.
research the researchers." And honestly, the first film was 23 different researchers, whether they be Meldrum or whether they be boots on the ground guy that sold paint by day and worked as a custodian. And then the next one was like 9 more interviews, and then this last one was like I think 5 interviews. We ended up having close to 40 interviews of very reputable people within 3 films,
Hmm.
and we really wanted to see on the native side of it, we wanted to get access that people hadn't gotten before. Well, I happen to have Cherokee Indian in me through my great, great, great grandfather,
Uh-huh.
Polk Brown. And it's one of those, I've not done any test or anything. We have done enough little paperwork trail to lead it back to know that my great, great, great grandfather, Polk Brown, fought in the Civil War on both
Hmm.
sides. He didn't
Oh,
like
wow.
any of the White Devils. He was kind of like a double agent. He fought for the North and he fought for the South. He had quite a few wives, and he ended up killing a man in his front yard with a rock for cussing him. He went to jail, outlived the jail sentence, and died at 115. So he's a pretty fascinating character. Well,
Wow.
that being said, short of I get a decent tan during the summer, and I've got this braid. I don't look very Native American, but I'm Lancaster, so I'm English, and I have the Dagnans and
That was
Blancets.
the thing. I was going to say
So
Bill
yeah,
Lancaster is probably the
yeah,
most English name I've ever heard.
yes, yeah. We actually go all the way back to the War of the Roses,
Oh,
Lancasters. I
wow.
know that much. Yeah, yeah. So that's pretty neat there. So,
Yeah.
anyways, but uh, but anyways, I had that going, and it was not like I was going, "Hey, I'm Native American. You
Mm.
should talk to me." I was like, "Look, I'm just letting you know I want you to watch our first 2 and see. We're not trying to make fun or exploit anybody. We're trying to share information, and we really want to share the information from you folks." And so I started approaching folks and building relationships just like me and you did. And when they got to knowing how we were and what we were doing, they were way more receptive and welcoming and accommodating than we ever imagined. I mean, for goodness gracious, when we finally got it all together, we were kind of wanting to do a north, south, east, west. We
Hmm.
wanted the natives' perspective from across the states, basically. And
Uh-huh.
so it was by design so that they're not even close together, but their stories are so similar. And here's some differences. And they're not even close together, but their stories are so similar and there's some differences. So we literally, these folks didn't know each other and their groups, their tribes were not anywhere near each other. So when we set about doing it, um, I had found out a few things that were particularly respectful to do as you're talking to these folks and as you're
Okay.
actually to the point of interviewing. And there were some things that I was making sure to do that were just like when you go to Japan, there's a culture difference. Well,
Yeah.
there's a culture difference within the reservation too.
When in
And
Rome.
so I was finding out things from other Native Americans who knew me and liked me and said, "Hey, you need to do this and they will respect you more." Well, I did that. And so we went on that trip. It was approximately 7,500 miles
Wow.
in 15 days. Me and my wife, our dog, and our camper behind us, and 23 states and Ontario, Canada. And we went to Ontario, Canada first, and we were at the Koshishing Nation, the Ojibwe, the Koshishing
Hmm.
Tribal Band Office. And not only did we get to interview Alan Yerxa Sr., but we got to meet the chief, and he gave us permission to film the last night of the powwow while we were up there, which is where
Wow.
you'll see some of the footage of the powwow, which was just I felt really odd because I was, basically a white man and I was doing this filming, and I didn't want to be disrespectful at all, except that the two key people, the chief and Alan, were the ones that said it is fine, they're good, and it was amazing. You honestly felt like you were somewhere you
Wow.
should not be, and we were just getting access to all kinds of stuff, and that's just the way it kind of flowed. We went to Yakima and filmed Mel Scahan interview and his aunt, Atwise Kamayason, Red Thunder, and she was great. She spoke the language and everything. Very educated lady. Not to diminish any of them, but she really had a lot of neat insight. And then I actually got to go out on the reservation with Mel and film in places that you just typically don't get to
Hmm.
go. Got to stand across from Mount Adams, 12,227-foot mountain, extinct volcano. Well, actually, I think it's technically not extinct, dormant,
Hmm.
I guess is the best thing.
Yeah.
And got to put my drone up and stuff and film out there and do the interviews.
Wow.
And then we went on down to Tahlequah, Oklahoma, to the Cherokee Heritage Center Museum, and Dr. Charles Gord, who was the PhD and the executive director of the museum. I'd reached out to him, and come to find out, he was so interested that we were wanting to talk to him about Bigfoot, because one of the things that he had studied back in college was Lakota Indians and some of their stories about Bigfoot. And so he was fascinated with the subject. He let us, have the run of the grounds down there. And then we got to speak with a Katua Cherokee, Chuji Kingfisher, who's like a national treasure storyteller within the
Uh-huh.
Cherokee Nation. He just was honored as being a national treasure and storyteller. And Paul Buckner, who is now the director of the Cherokee Heritage Museum. He's an author also, has a couple books, fictional books out about native Bigfoot. And then from there, we went down to Beeville, Texas to meet Baltimore Galvan Jr., who is an Apache. And we were out in the scrub brush desert, 102 degrees, and he
Wow.
had built an authentic Wikiput, and we filmed his interview out there. And
How
just
was that?
the information and stuff, and the landscape and stuff, it was just amazing. But I hope that kind of answers what you were talking or you were
Definitely.
asking
I
about
mean,
there.
if I'm somewhat silent, Bill, it's because it's fascinating. It's very, very fascinating. Now, I've, I'm currently writing Beasts of North America, which is geographical North America, even includes Greenland. And
Mm-hmm.
um, what astonishes me about the place is that it appears to be so different. And this was also something I noticed on my short trip there in 2018. It appeared to be so very different to how I'd expected to be on the television, via documentaries and things that we all know and see. Now, the United States is a very, very well televised country.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody around the world has some sort of concept of what they think it's like in the United States. And the First Nations people, they really fascinated me. One, because obviously I realize, similarly to my own country, that there are indigenous peoples who've been here longer than the I suppose the most dominant
Mm-hmm.
culture.
Mm-hmm.
And in our nation, that would be the different Celts. So I suppose people might think of Britain, they might think of Scotland and England, or Scotland and Ireland, England, or Wales, but they wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
think of the Manx and the Cornish still existing amongst those
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And for the people like the Ojibwe or the Lakota or the Cherokees, um, I've always wanted to know, what their perspective is. Did the modern persons, the young people, do they think of these things still as some sort of spiritual animal, or is there more of a modern recognition of a creature existing within their reservations or their landscape that they think is just an unknown zoological phenomena?
Um, Well, kind of a couple answers to that. First of all, the one thing that worries every one of them that we talked about in each different tribe is that the young people just aren't as interested in it as the older people are, and they're afraid that besides a lot of them aren't even learning their language and carrying
Mm.
it on, they're not learning a lot of their stories. That was one of the things that stuck through the whole thing. But the biggest thing that stuck through is that they definitely believe it is a very biological thing, but
Mm.
they definitely believe it walks in both worlds. It's a
Uh,
spirit. Oh, sorry. My
that's
wife
okay.
must be coming home. I just heard the garage door opening
It's
underneath me.
okay.
I didn't know what's. Anyways, um, but they definitely believe that they walk in both worlds. They are a spiritual type being.
Mm.
A lot of folks want to say paranormal. Well, paranormal is just anything outside of the norm. These are
Yeah.
supernatural beings as far as they're
Hmm.
concerned, but they can also be of flesh and blood.
Uh,
And that's why there are actually encounters, physical footprints. And according to most of them, typically when you find footprints and stuff like that, it's only because they want you to find it. It's
uh,
never a mistake, was kind of a thing. It's because they want you
okay.
to find it.
That's very interesting, and that seems to be. I wonder in some cases, could this be when footprints are found? Could this sometimes just be the bravado of young boisterous males to
Hmm.
not cover their tracks, to say I'm here and deal with it, or is that their perspective as well, or do they think they want you to find their footprints for some other more spiritual purpose to show
Hmm.
that they're still a part of the land? What's the
Hmm.
differentiation? Do they think it's more to do with behavior that the creature has, or domination of an area, or is it more communication with people on the reservation?
Yeah, I think it's. I think the most of the time it was more of a communication thing. It was definitely uh, what was coming across was it was letting them know they were there. It was still either trying to teach them something, good behavior, bad behavior, don't go here, or you're welcome here. It was definitely. Uh, it wasn't just a by chance kind of thing. It seemed
Mm,
like most of the time it was for, if you watch the film, Mel Scahan, we finished up with a very fascinating story at the end. And it's almost 10 minutes because I cut it down from 25 to 10 minutes,
wow,
but it was too fascinating to cut it anymore. You'll probably hear my dog in the
that's
background.
okay.
Sorry about that. He's saying hi to mom.
That's all
Uh,
right.
but anyways, Mel has tells a story in there about years ago finding some hair while he was out doing his job for the Yakima Nation. He's in kind of land and resources and forestry, and so what he does is him and another guy will go out for days at a time camping out, and they will be kind of gridding areas, and they'll put like this grid can be used for uh, timber cutting next year, and this
Hmm.
one can, and this one needs to be seeded and planted. And so he was one of those that they would do that kind of earth renewal kind of stuff. Look, we need to make money, so we're going to rent this out or lease it out for
Mm,
timber, but we also need to replenish it. So, anyways, he was in the woods a lot, and just to him, it was just a matter of fact these things existed. There was no question
mhm,
in his mind, period. And the people that were with him. When I met him, he took me into his office, and Andy, there was a map of the Yakima Reservation that was easily as big as that wall behind you,
mhm.
and he had just spots where there were all these interactions and
Wow.
eyewitness accounts and whatnot. It was amazing. Well, anyways, while he was out one time, he found some hair. And he knew it wasn't a cow that had gotten loose. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't a mountain lion, none of this stuff. He said, I knew what it was. And he said, so I just took it, stuck it in an envelope and put it at my desk. Well, the people there were like, you need to send this off.
Mm.
and get this analyzed and see what it is. And he says, I don't need to do it. Well, fast forward, it's been a couple years. He got the hair. He thinks he knows what it is. It's in his desk and everything. Well, they ended up having to go basically to a house cleansing within the reservation. Someone had some bad spirits in the house, and so they had actually called in a shaman from down, from what I gather, down central United States around
Mm.
Oklahoma, and he had come up to do a house cleansing, and he was part of it. Mel was, and during the ceremony, they cut all the power off and everything. Well, basically, he said the shaman said you're going to have folks. They were inviting the spirits in to get this bad spirit out, and he said you're going to have interactions with folks you may or may not know and whatnot. So be prepared for this. Well, if you watch the film, I won't give a ton of detail, but if you watch the film, he ends up having an interaction with a Sasquatch, and he's like, "What is this?"
Mm.
Well, at the end of it, the shaman ends up coming up to him, and he says, "And you had something that shouldn't have been here." Well, he pulls him aside, away from everybody outside, and he says, "Listen, you had a Sasquatch. That I'm trying to think the name for it. Uh, uh, Shukaloo. It's escaped me right now. I should have looked at my notes, but the name that they Tutasia. That's what they call it,
Uh-huh.
Tutasia. That's the Yakima name for it. You had a Tutasia come in and visit you, and it shouldn't be here. And the reason it did is because you have something that it wants, and you shouldn't have. And
Huh.
if you don't replace this, he's going to make sure to bother your family and your family's family from here on out. And he said, I'm going to tell you what you need to do to take this back and the ritual you need to do and everything. And if you do this, then everything will be fine. And this will be your one pass. But if you don't, then you're going to have some issues. And
Mm.
so basically, he ended up going back out to the location where he had found it, and he had done the ritual and everything, and he basically made it right with him. And so
Huh.
that was one of those of a Sasquatch, Tutathea, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it. That was one of those having an interaction of telling you you did something right or you did something wrong. But he said from that point forward, he could tell when they were around and everything, and they knew him and they respected him. Now you would look at some people just like they're nuts when they're telling
Mm.
you this stuff, but when this is coming from a college educated guy who works within the government of his tribe and
Mm-hmm.
organization, and he does a job like this, and he's telling you this knowing that you could very easily make fun of him and think that he's not telling the truth, um, it makes it all that more credible and believable.
I
And
thought
trust me, if you watch the film and watch the end there, the
well,
story is absolutely fascinating.
it's I just thought of myself today actually. Before we came on, it's, oh, I haven't seen that yet. I've desperately been trying to see that. Now, it I advise everybody listening, by the way, out there to definitely see all your films because they're amazing. And this one we'll watch together, because it's a must have. I'm fascinated by this perspective with the First Nations people, and it reminds me like from a perspective like somebody like myself, and I'm a very religious person actually, and I studied religion for my degree, and I'm married to somebody from a different religion to me, and you get these different perspectives, and it's a great way to really have an objective perspective of your own belief when you encounter the belief of
Mm-hmm,
somebody else, especially like you
mm-hmm,
say, a professor or somebody in a very professional capacity that has seemingly illogical beliefs. Now, by illogical, we
mm-hmm.
mean non-scientific, still
Yeah,
faith-based
not
and
normal. Yeah.
not normal. And yet, I wouldn't have any qualms with telling you that I believe, that a Jewish man died 2020 years ago, and because of that, you know, I believe
Yeah.
in God and follow him.
Right.
Um, that sounds quite extraordinary to
Mm-hmm,
anybody, really. If you read the book and you've got no
mm-hmm,
interest or no available interaction with that religion, you'd think it was very strange.
mm-hmm,
Similarly, to me, this does, but I often wonder, like many religious and beliefs and philosophies, does this eventually and essentially hinder, scientific discovery? And I think yes, because if somebody of that standing in that community is going to put hair back and not hand in evidence or not examine it or take it further forward himself, then
Hmm.
that's clearly going to be you know, the status quo with the rest of the nation or the rest of the culture. And perhaps there's evidence found all the time that we just don't get to see.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot that we were not privy to that they wouldn't go into even during the interview, and I left it in part of it with at twice where she says, and there's some other stories which I'm not going to be able to share at this time, and there's
Mm,
basically stories that you have to be a part of their culture, you have to
mm,
be a native or a First Nation to to be able to hear the other part of the stories and everything. And as much as I wanted, I got some absolutely fascinating stuff because trust me, the next thing that we're doing is doing our Bigfoot archives,
mm.
and what that is going to be an episodic thing, and it's going to be the extended interviews from all three of our films because
Awesome.
we had to cut so much stuff out, and especially when it comes to the Native American part, there's some absolutely wild stuff that didn't get to make it in that will just people will find fascinating in there
That sounds amazing. It really does.
because it's one of those things just like you said when they put themselves out there, and that's why it makes someone like Dr. Jeff Meldrum so much more believable. He's still a working professor with tenure at
Mm,
Idaho State University, and he's able to do what he does with these conferences and these researchers, uh, and uh, and still maintain credibility. And that's not not easy to do because he even I asked him directly in the first film about the
mm,
fact that when they were down in Phoenix at that conference down there for the university, and they went out into the hills looking for signs of Sasquatch and Bigfoot, and he came under fire from local government and school officials down there for doing that, and he speaks to stuff like that where they have everything to lose, but that's what makes it so much more credible when you
yeah.
find someone within the nation and they actually have a job within the government. They actually have, not that anyone without a college education is even any lesser, but these
No,
folks have degrees and stuff, and so they're typically going to be a lot more of a critical thinker than the regular person off the street,
it's
and
their
they're also
training.
going to
Yeah,
yeah, and they're
it's their
also
training.
going to think about what am I going to sound like if I say this too. So
Mhm.
they know the risk when they put this out here.
The risk seems very, very high. Now, I remember speaking to him about that, Jeff Meldrum, and him saying, well, fortunately, I had tenure when I started down this road, already had
Mhm,
tenure. If I
mhm.
hadn't, perhaps things would have gone a different way.
Yeah,
But this man is an anthropologist, and foot morphology as well is it's his speciality. So when he
right.
found those footprints originally when he was hiking, was it in Washington State? I don't remember the
It
story.
was Blue Mountain, and
Blue,
I think
okay,
it was the Blue Mountains. Yeah, he found like a line of like
15-inch print.
15 or
Yeah.
15, something like that, about 15 prints or whatever. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it was one of those. Yeah, he wasn't expecting to find that either, and found it.
A guy like that finds it. That's his speciality to be there, to
Hmm.
know what a human footprint looks like, and to see bipedal prints and realize that they're not human. They're very large. Oh, sure, that's. I always call that's the when somebody has a real experience, they can't unsee what they've seen, and it
Yeah.
affects them to the point where even when life and liberty, or normally life and financial prosperity, is
Hmm.
at risk, they can't deny what they know.
Hmm.
It's a life-changing experience. They can't say, well, unfortunately, I've changed my mind. It doesn't exist. They say, well, no, I've had the experience. This has happened to me, and there's still something I can't explain. I watched the Todd Standing thing he did, the
Hmm.
Discovering Bigfoot. That was
Yeah.
very interesting.
Hmm.
Obviously, and then again, taking another risk, but in the Bigfoot community, to
Hmm.
do a documentary with somebody who's so controversial
Yeah.
within
Yeah.
that community. And
Yeah.
I had
I want so much to believe that he has invested the time in the bush to get that fantastic footage.
Mhm.
But there's just so much that says
Something.
he's not being entirely honest. It's one of those things you
Yeah.
just don't know. And the best description I get is him, like so many others, they've had a real encounter and experience, and they want it so bad that they finally get to the point they're willing to make another encounter experience
Mm.
happen. And I don't know, is that what's going on or what? I want to believe those fascinating faces.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's what one really looks like. I want to believe it so bad. And in the beginning, before we started doing filming and interviewing and everything and deciding we were going to do even
Hmm.
Bigfoot documentaries, I had watched his stuff on Sylvanic.com, his
Yeah.
website and everything, and followed him. And I was a hook, line, and sinker. I thought,
Yeah.
well, he got Meldrum and he got Bendernagel and all these folks to go, and none of them would discount it. You know,
No.
they were very cautious when you would ask them about it. I never got to
Yeah.
speak with
I
Bitternagel,
thought so
but
too.
Mildred,
Yeah.
they were very cautious and guarded. They didn't want to totally discount what had happened while they were with him, but they didn't want to, I guess, put themselves totally in his camp
Yeah.
either. And so that's what makes it so interesting. I want to believe what he's got, but I just,
Well,
there's,
what
you know,
somebody said to me about him is that he's not likable. And somebody said, look, he's definitely I won't say who said it, but he's definitely a great outdoorsman. Definitely knows what he's talking about as far as the wilderness is concerned. And they've had experiences out there with him, but said, you know, he just isn't. It doesn't come across well. He's not a likable person.
I've heard the
Um,
same thing. Yeah.
and I think that some people do suffer from that sometimes, where their personality seems to project something out. Now, I often wonder, you know, if you've been called a liar for 10 years nonstop, and then you make a big documentary, could every interaction you have with everybody almost be, you know, an attempt to to regain your credibility or to portray your honesty? You know, it's almost as if you say, "This really happened to me." Honestly, the word honestly almost invalidates it straight away, right? Because honest people
Right.
don't say honestly. But
Right.
there's
Right.
something in it when you've been accused for long enough. Now, me and a friend, we used to go out here in the UK, and there's a little chat. And I used to just do a little bit of filming on the mobile phone when we were walking around. We had this little chat, and I named it "The Perils of Being Todd Standing." So the joke we used to have is when we're going out looking for British Bigfoot, for example, is let's hope to God we don't find anything, especially footage, because then we're finished. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. There you
yeah,
go. It's a double-edged sword. Yeah, it
yeah,
is.
because
Yeah.
God forbid some guys who are interested in Bigfoot should capture some evidence of
Yeah.
one. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly they've got some, you know, they've got some stake in finding that footage. Now,
Uh,
personally, when I take witness sightings, I love the antagonistic witness best. The one that says, "Oh, it was like a tall monkey with a man's face and two legs." And they don't even know the name Bigfoot. And oh, I've never thought of anything like this before, and it really shocked me.
uh,
Awesome. When it comes
yeah.
to somebody who's really into Bigfoot that sees one that goes out all the time, I realize from my own perspective that I have to really validate whether this person is seeing what they
Right.
want to see or whether they
Right.
had the experience they were looking for.
Mhm.
But why? It's such a
Yeah.
strange situation to be in.
Yeah. Well, we have been officially, while we've been filming these, I guess you could say we officially have been squatching 3 different times out in the woods where there were Bigfoot sightings and looking for evidence and whatnot. And I have taken my camera and my sound equipment and stuff. And I had told my wife, I said, you know, it would be great if we could catch something because I'm not using a camera phone. I've got, you know, my 1080 or my 4K camera here and some good sound and everything. Um, and it was one of those deals where if you actually catch something, and you could imagine what I should be able to catch with my nice
Mm.
camera, but nobody else can do it. But you can imagine, you know, I can shoot stuff that looks sharp on there. But when you're trying to find something like that, and I'm just going to give you an example. We
Mm.
happened to be, I had my camera, I was out with a group filming an episode of what I used to have up. I had about 10 episodes up called Bigfoot BS with Bill and Sam.
All
And
right.
it was basically while I was getting ready to film Cultured Bigfoot, it was me honing my skills at filming and editing. And so I would put them up. They'd be anywhere from 7 minutes to 14 minutes long on YouTube, and I pull them down. I can share the private links with you if you want to watch
Oh,
them
I'd
because they
love
were
to.
actually kind of
I'd
neat.
love to.
And I will. I'll actually unlock those and share a private link for you to check them out. But anyways, um, what I'm getting at is my wife was with me too, and there were, I'm thinking, approximately 5 or 6 people with us that were all a part of this group. And we're going back through these woods to an area that had had a sighting. Finding Bigfoot had actually been there during season 2 in their episode Virginia's for
Mhm.
Bigfoot Lovers. It was the area where Bobo puts donuts on a tree, and this guy had
Oh
seen
yeah.
one. And they had the Gum Hill Wood Booger. By the way, the Gum Hill Wood Booger that they talked about is like 15 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, by the way.
Awesome.
That's the place we used to go hiking a lot. But anyways, um, so we're back there in this area where I had interviewed a guy previously, a deacon in a church, no less, and his brother were hunting, and they had had a Bigfoot encounter back there. So we were going towards that area, a place of a known Bigfoot encounter. We were also parked at the road where Finding Bigfoot had set their little trailer, production trailer up. So we were in a hot spot area. And we're going back through there, and I've got my camera equipment, and I literally have it on the whole time because I've got enough battery, I've got enough card, and I've just got it kind of on a little steady cam kind of thing rig.
Mm.
And we ended up finding this footprint at this little, not really a creek, but kind of a wash that ran across the trail. Like a heavy rain, it'll look like a little creek. And it was one of those, it looked like a human barefoot footprint, but it was only, about the size of a woman's foot or whatever.
Mhm.
And everybody gets all excited. Well, a couple of the very reasonable skeptical guys put out, this is a perfect example of a bear stepping in its own tracks. That's a
Mhm.
bear print. And it was a perfect example, but you could see where if you were wanting to see that and you
Yeah.
wanted it to be that, it could be nothing else but. Well, keep in mind, I'm filming that. And as we're filming that, all of a sudden, one of them says, "Hey, something just stepped behind that tree straight ahead of us." And I pulled the camera up that quick and got auto zoom and all that stuff like that. Could not get anything. Well, what it boiled down to is we surmised it was the black bear because there's
Mm.
black bears in our area. And it had went like behind that tree. And when we got up through there, we could see where it probably was, black bear in the leaves and stuff like that. But I had a camera that's capable of shooting 1080 HD, had a telescoping microphone, had it running, and I still could not catch a black bear going behind a tree.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so there you go. That's just it's
Well,
it's one of
this
those things.
happens all the time, and people don't talk about this very much. So when people talk about footage and evidence, and why didn't you get your camera out? There's always the old example of, have you ever seen a car crash?
Yeah,
Have you ever
yeah,
caught one on camera as it
yeah,
happened?
yeah,
I mean, that
yeah,
is, as it starts to happen, have you ever whipped
yeah.
out your camera
Mhm.
and captured it? You haven't, and
I
it's strange. I was yeah, yeah.
I was going to say that and I'll finish up and let you talk
Oh
there
no,
with
it's
this one, but
okay.
to speak to that same thing, I was at a conference here locally down in Kingsport, and you always have the skeptic that try and get you on everything. And there was a man and his daughter, and he had said, "Well, if you've got all this equipment and everything, why can't you get a good picture of them, and why can't anybody else get a good picture?" And so I said, "All right, let me ask you something. Do you have your cell phone on you?" "Yep." "Does it have a camera phone?" "Yep." I said, "All right, you and your daughter come up here." He said, "Okay." And he stood beside me at the podium. And I said, "All right, now I'm going to tell your daughter to start walking that way in just a minute. I'm going to tell you when she is. I want you to go ahead and get your camera phone ready and everything. You know what you got to do, your shortcuts to get it ready and everything. And when I tell you walk, I want you to get a good picture of her." And he goes, "Okay." And I said, "All right, you got everything ready?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Put your camera in your pocket, your phone in your pocket." He puts it in his pocket, And I say, walk. She goes to walking. He couldn't even catch her in frame because
Ah,
she had already walked to the other side of the room. And I said, that right there is exactly why. I told you you were going to take a picture of your daughter, and I was going to tell you to do it when she started walking, and you still
yeah.
couldn't get a picture of her. So why are you going to argue about someone can't get a good picture of this? And the people in the room were like, wow, that's like a, they thought it was just an ingenious, that's a perfectly good explanation because it's
Mhm.
just not that simple.
I think that's a perfect example. All I was going to say actually was that I was walking past the dock here near the house. I live near the River Thames, and I had my camera on. I was actually filming some grebes. I think they were grebes, crested grebes in the dock. And they're not supposed to be in this part of the country or in this country at all, but they are in this country. Wels catfish. I saw what I thought was the head of a Wels catfish breaching just there. I was filming here. It was just there, and it was up for maybe a second or two. I don't know. Sometimes they come up and they gulp air, don't they? They're not
Mhm.
supposed to be here, so it would be an unusual sighting. And I turned the phone to capture it, and it was gone. And it was
Yeah,
right there. My phone was running. All I had to do
yeah,
was do this
yeah,
and
it
capture it,
is.
and I
Yeah,
missed it.
yeah,
And that
yeah.
stuff like that happens all the time. As well as losing animals that know their environment in the bush. We also have,
Mhm.
you know, we're on the edge of Surrey here, on the outside of London, but we're still pretty close. There's trees and wooded areas, and I was in a quite a sort of a local town. It's quite suburban, and I noticed a deer just on the edge of a small bit of woodland, really tiny, not even an acre. I thought, oh, I'll get this on camera. And I pulled my camera out and it walked into the bush. I walked down the path to see it. I thought, oh, I'll get a close up. It was gone.
Yeah,
It was gone in 1 second. And then
yeah,
surely I could find a deer, a small deer, in
yeah,
this less than an acre of woodland. It wasn't thick woodland. It wasn't deep. It wasn't there wasn't a lot of foliage, and I just thought animals are adept at hiding in their own environments. And something like a Sasquatch, I don't think you're ever gonna find it unless,
yeah,
like the Native Americans say, unless it
yeah,
wants to be found.
yeah. Well, and see, that's the thing is it's unless it wants to be found. And if you just take a minute to give some credence to them talking about they walk in our world and they walk in
Mm,
theirs, and people want to give people like Ron Moorhead and them, for having his quantum theory and parallel universe stuff and all this, well, I'm going to be honest with you. If they have that capability, it would make a whole lot less of us seem like idiots because they literally are able to just make themselves disappear or literally able to make it to where you can't see them. They affect you somehow,
yeah,
and so if you'll just believe it for a minute, the paranormal supernatural stuff makes it a lot more plausible
mm,
that we can't find these because of that. Because if they are just a regular, a type of a bear or a type of a primate, we're going to be able to find them. We're going to find them on game cams and stuff like that. And so it's one of those things. The more we got into this, I honestly, I mean, I've been into it since Mr. Spock
mm.
was on in search of talking about Bigfoot and Loch Ness
Same,
monster and all that.
same.
I'm with you, Andy. Loch Ness monster, UFOs, Bigfoot. That was my thing. All of that
Yeah,
stuff there,
definitely,
especially Loch Ness
definitely.
monster. So that was why I was fascinated with your stuff. But anyways, um, but I just lost my train of thought there too.
Oh,
Um,
no, well, yeah, I mean, you're basically talking about the concept of it makes it a lot easier for us to
oh
believe
yeah,
that they could be paranormal because we can't find them. I always fall on the other side, which is sometimes I think the paranormal aspect of things is our way of justifying our inability to find this very
mhm,
clever animal and say
mhm,
it's got to be paranormal because it seemed to disappear. But I think when a creature knows it's like my little deer that ran away, if the creature knows its environment well enough, it knows how to blend and to hide and to seemingly
mhm.
disappear. Maybe I could be wrong, I always said that I like to start on the point, even with things like Dogman, that it's a real creature. Although we might not have you know a record in archaeology to justify its existence, doesn't mean it's not here with us. It just means that we haven't really figured out all the aspects yet. And if at the end of all of that we figure out it's some sort of paranormal dimension jumping
Well, I can just
horror
go ahead
from
and
hell,
clear it up. Yeah, I can go ahead and clear it up. Dogman is Anubis from ancient Egypt. That's just I can clear that one up.
there you go. I mean, well, yes. I mean that's but then a lot of religions and beliefs have these dog-headed creatures, and
Mm-hmm.
even in Jewish tradition and well, Christian tradition too, by default, many demonic fallen angels have animal-like characteristics, and
Mm-hmm.
that's written about in the Bible. So some people more on the religious side would justify that kind of creature by some sort of manifestation of one of those um, demons or fallen angels or whatever you will. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm always trying to tell people that I completely realize that I'm subject to, subject to the parameters of my belief system. I know that my view of everything is affected by it. Even when I try not to be, it's going to be affected by
Mm-hmm.
it. And I
Mm-hmm.
just find it easier to just come out with that and just sort of make a declaration at the beginning that that's where I'm coming
Yeah.
from, and then at least when people do find fault with it, they'll know it's because that's Andy's,
Well,
life philosophy, etc.
that's where I was going when I lost my train of thought was when we had gotten into this in the community side of it and the filming side of it and everything. I really wanted it to just be an undiscovered species. Neither man nor ape, just an undiscovered species. And the further we got into this, I don't think it is. I think there is truly, especially after fooling with the paranormal Bigfoot side and the Native American side, I just think there truly is something to it. And a lot of them will still just absolutely laugh at you for saying that. But I'm talking about getting information from you know respectable researchers in this field and stories from people that have everything to lose and nothing to gain. None of these folks were making money off being in our documentaries. It
No,
was
of
their own
course,
time,
of
kind of
course.
thing. You know, um, but it's just one of those. The further we've gotten into it, uh, I used to be excited going in the woods, and I used to be a deer hunter, and so I know exactly what you're talking about. The deer just like disappearing. That was forever frustrating. But now, when we get a chance to go in the woods, I'm not thinking of what is that sound? Is it a deer? Is it a squirrel? Is it a bird? Now I'm thinking about is it something else out there? Because there's been encounters in our area within just a few miles of we literally live in between the mountains. If you look up Bristol, Virginia, and just do a
Uh-huh.
Google Earth and start pulling back, we're just nothing but mountains and hills around us. It's like I said, it's one of those things. I'd love it to be just nothing but an undiscovered species, but I just don't think it is anymore. I think there's something to it. It's definitely flesh and blood, but I think there's definitely you know um, a spiritual side to it. You know, some folks want to say interdimensional portals, whatever you want to say. Uh, they're able to come and go as they please. It would seem
Hmm.
like, um, and not just by adaptive camouflage like a predator or something.
Hmm.
And this is just, again, it's not me being any kind of an expert on the subject. It's from listening to all of these folks we've talked, reading and watching documentaries and videos and everything. And there's absolutely something to it. It's one of those. I don't know if I want to run into one or find
Mm.
one because the
That's something
spiritual
that we
side
look
of
at.
me, as you talked about too, I'm an Orthodox Christian, and so
Uh-huh.
the spiritual side of me says there's a lot of possibility of stuff that can be out there, including a creature like this right there. And so
Mm.
am I supposed to continue looking for it, or am I better off just kind of leaving that alone?
Yeah, I thought about it a lot. I thought about that concept a lot from my experience and from my religious standpoint. And I just thought, well, I was criticized in the early days of coming out by a lot of the British guys for being a creationist. And I pointed out to them really that um, I'm not a creationist cryptozoologist. I'm the cryptozoologist that's also a creationist by faith, by belief.
Yeah,
But
right.
it's I'm not out there proving creation, so to speak. I don't got anything against that, but I'm not, a Kent Hovind or a Don Patton or one of those guys. I'm just a religious guy who loves cryptozoology. That's kind of
That's yeah,
where I'm
that's
at.
the way we are. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's us. Yeah,
yeah, and I'm fully prepared to admit, and I even write about it in the book, that this particular slant that I have is against my best efforts going to form some of my opinions on what I'm looking at. It's just it's impossible to avoid, just impossible. So, with that in mind, if we just stick to the stories, just stick to reports, especially, I was looking for evidence for so long, and I realize now I actually stopped calling it cryptozoology. I started calling it modern folklore or prospective cryptozoology or prospective zoology, sorry, because I thought the evidence seems to be a bit of a wild goose chase, essentially. If you stay with the credible reports, you build up a picture. You should still look for evidence, but the reports, especially, is really what we have. So that's where it's at. That's what you're doing, documenting the search, documenting the opinions and beliefs and philosophies about what it might be. That's the most important thing.
yeah.
It's
You're building
almost
a
an
profile.
anthropological, yeah, exactly. So I really like it. I love the work that you guys are doing, by the way. I really love it. And also the
Thank
connection.
you.
We definitely hit it off on that first day, even though we were all sort of assigned to our seats
Yeah,
in
yeah,
the conference. And again, I really appreciate those guys putting me on. They do a great conference, regardless of my particular gripes. But yeah, it's also nice to get a few riders and to feel special because you've given your time and your product over to people to make their venue work for them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's one of the things we have made as far as speaking to the community. We have made a ton, yourself included, and I mean, goodness sakes, you're in the UK and here we are in the US, but still maintain a friendship. We have made a lot of really good friends, but there has just been an absolute horrible amount of just mean people. That's all
Oh
you can
yeah.
say. Mean to each other, mean to us. We've had a
Oh, you're
couple
not alone.
surprising instances. We've had a couple surprising instances of people that are supposed to be, icons and legends within the
Oh
community
yes.
that have turned out to be just absolutely horrible.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah.
and to the point that, if you tell anybody how horrible I am, we're going to ruin you. And you're
Oh
just like,
yeah.
golly, people. They're just,
Yeah.
it's, and that's another thing. We had already decided this year we were only doing like 4 or 5 conferences, and then this whole pandemic thing came along and
Yeah.
canceled even more. So right now we've still got a couple we're doing November and October, but we're really just kind of cutting back that side of it because there's just a it's the word the
It's
Bigfoot
a
drama. There's
difficult,
a
yeah,
ton
it's
of
a
that.
difficult community. I mean, Bill, not to jump in on you, but I've talked about it recently with people that, my point of view was this. I had another incident with a long-term adversary that was a friend originally, and I've got so many former friends that are now adversaries in this community, and I've just never experienced anything like it at all. Now,
Mhm.
I've only been really doing career cryptozoology since 2016. Before then, I worked, and for 30 plus years, I was a singer, songwriter, touring and playing music, and since I was 12 years old, doing all the whole music scene, and that can be
Mhm.
very catty and very sort of
Yeah.
duplicitous. But
Yeah.
I never experienced anything like I've experienced now in the music scene, and
Yeah.
that's a real insult to
Yeah.
cryptozoology.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just thought, oh my goodness, like what now? And who's doing this? And
Yeah.
there's so much anger over divergence of opinion. And what I've come to the conclusion of is two things. One, we're all big fish and it's a little pond. And we've only got each other to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the second thing is that much of it is faith-based. And I know this
Mm-hmm.
from studying religion, from being religious, and when you question somebody's theory, often
Mm-hmm.
what you realize with this like God-shaped hole we have in society, it's actually formed a sort of a basis of faith about something.
Mm-hmm.
When you
Mm-hmm.
question core belief, you question the individual's reality, and that they
Yeah.
can't. That's not acceptable. So that's where
Right.
some of the and I've always been I'm British, I'm polite, but unfortunately I've got my wife's habit of just naming the elephant in the room, and because I'm polite, I think I don't meet people's expectations. They're saying, well, hang on a second, I thought I was stepping all over you, and now you've just told me I'm an idiot. I want to make a complaint. I want to speak to the manager because
It's
I
awesome,
didn't
and that
expect
is
you to put me in my
that
place.
that's one good thing is with the British accent and everything. You could sound very polite and just rip someone to shreds at the same time. I love it.
They do. I mean, there is a talent for. I grew up in Wales actually, and we're sort of an Irish English mixed family. And in England, in southern England, where I live now, even Welsh people will complain about how they'll politely dress you down in a way that you can't come back against, because all
Yeah.
the small little quips are in such ambiguous language. And I always wondered, what is it about the British and the English especially that makes um, diplomatic insults so important. And when you go around the country, there was a study recently where they found that in each region, in England and Scotland and Wales, there's very different accents throughout this tiny country, or comparatively small country. And they did a genetic study on skeletons and bones from 1,000 years ago and present day populations in those areas, and found that the DNA sequence was the same for the people in those areas as it was 1,000 years ago,
Hmm.
primarily. And the people hadn't moved around; they'd stayed tribal and in their areas, primarily in their regions.
Hmm.
And I thought that this is the reason we had so many invasions and so many different cultures moving in former times, that you had to be diplomatic and you couldn't just say what you thought, because it would lead to a war with a
Yeah.
neighboring tribe, and
That's
that's
very
why.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yep.
and when you're taking over 54 countries around the world as well, again, some level of diplomacy is needed because you've stolen their land. And
Yeah.
yeah, you better bring some sort of administrative
Uh,
juncture into place. Look, we probably should end here, but I just want to say I really, really enjoyed it. I will put all of your links up, but just for the people listening, where can they find you? Is there something specific that you're selling that you
mhm.
want to have or you want to know about?
Yeah. First of all, you can find all three of our Bigfoot trilogy documentaries on Amazon. And they are available in the UK. The first two are on Amazon Prime, which means if you have Amazon Prime, they're streaming for free. The first one is Cultured Bigfoot, second Paranormal Bigfoot. Third one just came out, is Native Bigfoot, and it's rent and download at this time.
Mm.
You can also go to our Facebook page, Bilco Productions, Cultured Bigfoot, Paranormal Bigfoot, Native Bigfoot, and you'll find links in there where you can actually click onto our Square site and you can order DVDs.
Mm.
You can actually order them singly or you can order all three of them. Now, the only thing is when it's going to the UK, it costs me about almost $15 to
Oh
mail
wow.
them to the UK. But I've actually got a friend over there that has bought every single one of our films. And every time they come out, I send them right over to him, Bristol, England. We're in Bristol, Virginia. He's in
Ah,
Bristol, England.
fantastic. Yes, I know Bristol well.
Nigel, if you're out there, Nigel, this is a shout out to you, sir. His is currently stuck in London Heathrow somewhere for the last 2 months, though. But anyways, due to the
Gosh.
virus. But yeah, just find us on Facebook, Bilco Productions with one L, or the name of the films, Cultured Paranormal, Native Bigfoot, and on those it'll have links. But the easiest way to get us, it's a digital age, is just go to Amazon, type in Bilco Productions, type in any one of the film names, and like I said, the first two you can watch totally for free, and the third one you can rent and download right now. Anyways, make sure and leave us a rating and review. Those are always important. We appreciate that. Share the word, but we appreciate doing stuff like this. And again, Andy happens to be one of those folks that we met randomly while doing this. A couple years ago now, Andy, is it
Two
two or
years ago.
three? 2 years
2 years
ago.
ago.
And
Wow.
we've
Yeah.
maintained a friendship. Maybe it's because we live so far apart, we've maintained a
Yeah,
friendship.
absence makes the heart grow fonder, Bill.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it could
But
be that, but I expect not. Well, listen, Bill Lancaster, it's been a real pleasure. I advise everybody, culture Bigfoot, native Bigfoot, paranormal Bigfoot. Check them out, buy them, stream them, and keep Bill in business and Amy too, because they really deserve to be here. Bill, thanks so much.
thank you too, sir.